This is a symphony about the Rocky Mountains through Colorado, from the Sangre de Cristos through Mount Evans and Long's Peak. You're supposed to see the music. When I write music, I see it in my mind. I see the notes, I see the instruments, I see the colors. I think the finger of God was the inspiration for all of this. The Rocky Mountains are one of the most beautiful places on earth. What do the American rocky, rugged mountains sound like? What do they look like through music? The symphony is meant to have that sense of renewal. What I'm hoping when people listen to the symphony, they go, oh, I remember where I started. I need to get back to that. That was my vision. That was my symphony. I need to finish writing that. I think sometimes we begin to believe what people are saying about us. If they're saying, hey, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're this. And I remember, in fourth grade, the teacher would literally say these things to me in front of the class. And I remember you start to believe these things. You start to sort of, they become part of who you are. But seventh grade was sort of a defining moment for me where I was like, I'm not that person. I don't care what they say. I think I can do more. And so I started really writing heavily. I started playing piano. I think in eighth grade I started toying with the idea of symphonies and writing symphonies. And probably around ninth grade, my brother and I had a band together. He played drums, I played keyboard and wrote the music. I had one teacher who really mentored me and really, it was funny because I played the piano in the choral room when nobody's around, and he'd like run around the corner to find out who it was, and it was like, wow, somebody like is interested in what I'm doing. This is crazy for me. I just hadn't really gotten that. So I really started getting into the idea of like writing symphonies at that point. I've got to believe that sometimes you can't let circumstances govern your dreams. You have to let your dreams govern your circumstances. I had this crazy dream one day when I was younger, and I was kind of going through this pain, and in the dream there was this man in front of me, and we were about waist deep in the water, and he was wearing this hood, this mask, so I couldn't see who he was, but he was fighting me. And I knew that if I didn't fight him, I was going to die. And so I either had to kill him or he was going to kill me. There was no alternative. There was no like happy solution. So we fought, and I overcame him, and I killed him. And right after I killed him, I pulled the mask off, and it was me. I was the person under the mask that I was fighting. And I realized, and that was sort of a turning point in my life where it's like, okay, I'm my own worst enemy. The only person that's going to keep me from achieving my dreams, that's going to keep me from writing for orchestras and symphonies and doing what I believe I'm here on the earth to do, is myself. And that changed everything. My dad gave me the greatest advice in the world. I think it was like 12th grade, or sort of the beginning of 12th grade. I told my dad, I said, Dad, you know, I'd been taking some law classes, and I really was into like the idea of being a lawyer. Suddenly, out of nowhere, you know how kids like, you know, you kind of get crazy. So I was into the idea of being a lawyer. So I said to my dad, I said, Dad, I think I want to study law. I want to go to law school instead of music school, which was going to be Berkeley. And my dad said something that changed my life forever. I always pause at this moment. It's sort of a dramatic thing. Just, okay. So he said something that changed my life forever. He looked at me, and my dad is a very simple, warm, loving guy, but a man of few words. He looked at me and he said, Charlie, you're too stupid to be a lawyer. So I studied music. So anyhow, I went on to study music, and believe it or not, that was a good thing. A turning point in my life happened December 2nd, 1985. It was funny, my brother and I were talking on the phone, and he wanted to know, he's 16 at the time, my little brother, Scotty, and he wanted to buy me a microphone for Christmas, which was cool, you know, and we were always best friends, we were always getting in trouble, and that was a cool thing. So it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we talked for a while, and then it was weird because I was at Berkeley in Boston, and it was my freshman year, and my parents showed up at the door. The police report said that it was an accident. I don't know. They left the report open. They never closed it. I spent that year praying every night. I knew that the only way I'd ever see Scott again was if I somehow got into heaven. So I prayed every night. God, tell me how to get into heaven so that I can see Scott again. I ended up dropping out of college. I didn't stick around much after that, and it just didn't make sense. And honestly, the classroom never worked for me. I didn't learn very well in the classroom. I knew that the only way I was ever going to really write symphonies and write music for orchestras would be if I taught myself how to do it. I spent the first hour of every day, and I still do this, I listen to symphonic music, I listen to symphonies, I listen to film score music, I listen to the music of great composers, and I sort of dissect it in my mind. I can sort of see the music. I see music in colors. I guess there's a term for it. I forget what it's called, but I see all of the instruments and all of their parts, and all of the sections of the orchestras are a different color. So when I hear the music, it helps me to dissect it. It helps me to see how everything moves, to see how the strings are voiced, to see the movement of the woodwinds, and so it took me a while, but eventually I started writing symphonies, and that's where Portraits of Colorado came from. I was toying with the idea for years of writing a symphony about Colorado. One, because nobody had ever done it. And even the Rocky Mountains, nobody had ever done that. And that was really intriguing to me. The Colorado Symphony commissioned me, and we put a date in mind to record the symphony and to premiere the symphony. But I didn't want a typical symphony. I wanted it to be a symphony with a big chorus. So we had 70 to 80 pieces in the orchestra. We had a 100-voice choir, which is really unusual for a symphony. Usually you don't have a choir. I didn't want it to be classical in sound, in nature. I wanted it to sound a little more filmy because I'm writing about the Rocky Mountains. I wanted people to see the Rocky Mountains when they listen to the music. So I had one critic criticize it and say, well, it sounds like a film score. And I'm thinking, well, it is. You're supposed to see what I'm writing about. This isn't just a random Charlie Denler symphony in B flat, number 1. What is that? I mean, people have been doing that for years. I mean, what is that? It doesn't give you a picture of anything. This is a symphony about the Rocky Mountains through Colorado, from the Sangre de Cristos, on up through Mount Evans and Long's Peak. You're supposed to see the music. When I write music, I see it in my mind. I see the notes, I see the instruments, I see the colors. When people listen to this, I want them to see it. Yes, it's a film score, but the film is being shown in your head and the music audibly is being played into your ears. So, is it a film score? Yep, absolutely, 100%. Nobody actually made the film. I think God made the film, to be honest. I think the finger of God was sort of the inspiration for all of this. If you want to take it to that end, the Rocky Mountains are one of the most beautiful places on earth. Everybody knows Colorado throughout the world, and I wanted to sort of capture that. What does Colorado sound like? What do the American sort of rocky, rugged mountains sound like? What do they look like through music? And so, yeah, if I've been criticized for sounding too filmy, I actually think that's great. It's perfect. It's exactly what I want. And criticized for not sounding too classical, perfect. It's exactly what I want. It's not supposed to be classical. Who am I? I'm just a guy who likes writing music for orchestras. And the music comes out the way I hear it in my head. So that was sort of the inspiration behind all of this.
When I first saw Charlie's piece, I was surprised that there were 13 movements. That's not what we think of when we think of a symphony. Usually think 4 or 5, maybe. So when I saw it, I thought, well, is this maybe more like a suite? But when he started describing how, well, this is a modern symphony, and people don't listen to music the way they did back when Beethoven was writing it back in the early 1800s. So if you don't listen to it the same, then probably the structure shouldn't be the same. And the idea that, the way people listen to music now, they'll download it to their phone or they'll put it on their computer. The way that he weaves some of the motives between the different movements together, it still holds together as a composition, not just a group of songs or not just a group of unrelated pieces. So it's got the unity of a symphony. It just it's not cut up in the same size pieces as what we think of as an old school symphony, a traditional symphony. But ironically, I gotta say, when I spoke to some people that have some pretty traditional views of symphonies, all I had to say is, well, that's not how people listen to music now, and we're looking for something that can be downloaded and you can get on iTunes. And immediately, people got it and they're like, oh, that's pretty clever. So it was clear to me that he hit on something that resonates even with traditional classical music listeners. So, and the way he's writing the music and the style and the language of music that it speaks is one that's, I think, very accessible to a lot of people.
Scott O'Neill is the resident conductor for the Colorado Symphony Orchestra. And he and I met over this project. And Scott O'Neill is probably one of the most intelligent people I've ever met in my life. And so it was sort of daunting because he is, the pure essence of like musicianship and, and understanding music. And I'm sort of the guy who, shoots from my hip and just writes what I feel without a lot of thought to structure and form. And if it sounds good, then it works. And so it was very interesting in us coming together. There was a neat synergy there because he began to understand my mind and he helped me understand the classical sort of connoisseur's mind. And that's what wrote this symphony, was that combination of us. We would get together almost once a week and just talk about music, talk about structure, talk about form, talk about symphonies. And that relationship really sort of helped bring form and structure to what I was doing symphonically with this symphony.
Charlie has that natural sense for an idea when it comes along. How long does it keep the mind entrained? And how quickly can I change? And when we hear cinematic music, you can almost hear that it's almost accompanied the way it will kind of take a new direction. And so you get some of that in his symphony. And so I think it's impossible, when you write something, it really, if you do it the way I know Charlie did, where it really comes from someplace deep inside of you, you're not going to be able to hide. You are going to come through in the music. The person that you are, the person that you've become, all the things that have made you are going to have some influence in that piece. And I hear that in this. It's got some cinematic, and I say cinematic, but another way of thinking of it is there are ideas, and it's one of the things I think Charlie's great at. When you hear the film scores that he's written, I've even heard some of them and thought, it's okay. But when I saw it fit with the music, I was like, wow, he really captured the essence of that scene. And he, to not overdo it, which is the challenge of a lot of composers, that you got all these clever ideas and you just want to show off, and it doesn't usually end up being the most expressive ideas. And I think he's good at being a self-editor and speaking directly and naturally and simply. And that's the stuff that, you hear it and it doesn't need to be translated. You don't have to figure it out. You don't have to have program notes to get it.
During Moment at Dawn, the choir sings in Latin. As a matter of fact, they sing in Latin through the entire symphony. Why they sing in Latin? It's an American symphony. I've been asked that. You know, I guess I could have chosen any language, but it just sounded cool. That's sort of what it comes down to. So the opera is singing in Latin, and they're singing this phrase, "A sole calafiere vivete alium diem," which means, in English, to feel the warmth of the sun, I will live another day. And the symphony is meant to have that sense of renewal, like Moment at Dawn is a sunrise. And then we go into Sunset over Long's Peak at one point. And you know, there's a sense of renewal there that I think is important for people, especially in our culture. We've sort of lost hope. We've gotten so caught up in our daily routines, and we're so money driven, we're so focused that it's easy to have that sort of inspiration that you started with ripped out of your heart. I kind of like to believe that every single person on earth has a symphony in their soul to be written. And what I'm hoping is, as they listen to Portraits of Colorado, as they listen to like the song Moment at Dawn, that it sort of awakens that symphony in their soul. It awakens that vision. It awakens that sort of driving force of why they got started on the path to begin with. You know, every once in a while you look back and you're like, how did I end up here? This is crazy. This kind of stinks. It wasn't what I expected. And what I'm hoping when people listen to the symphony, they go, oh, I remember where I started. I need to get back to that. That was my vision. That was my symphony. I need to finish writing that. When the Colorado Symphony and I started first talking about this, I was sort of desperate for inspiration. I spent a lot of time hiking in the Rocky Mountains, and I can picture them in my mind, but like in my studio, I really wanted inspiration. And my wife and I had purchased this King Charles Cavalier Spaniel from this really cool woman in Texas. And we had met them in southern Colorado. They have a house there.
We brought the dog up to our place in La Vida, and they came and picked it up. And I had several paintings there that I was beginning to paint, and Charles had mentioned he liked the paintings, but you know, everybody that bought a dog from Lila would always come up to my paintings and say, hey, I love your paintings.
Now we're a few years ahead, and I'm working on the symphony. So I find this guy's name online, and I started looking at his work, and he's like known as this painter of landscapes, American landscapes, and particularly Colorado mountains. And so I'm looking at, there's this one called the Sangre de Cristo, and they're amazing sort of Hudson River style paintings, and just those gorgeous, greens and yellows, to me that just, they're so romantic looking. And so I started downloading this guy's work and printing copies of his paintings.
And I remember Charles vaguely. He did say that, he was a musician. And, years later, he mailed me a CD, but like I say, the meeting was so brief that I didn't think much about it. But then I had these CDs, and I liked them, and I painted to them. And I felt guilty as all get out because I lost all the information on him. And every time I'd listen to his music, I'd think, you know what, I'm really ripping this guy off because he doesn't even know that I'm painting to his music.
And I took these copies and I pasted them all over the studio so that I could just see them while I'm writing. And so after a while, I'm like, I kind of like doing this thing. I'm downloading this guy's work and creating copies, and honestly, it was incredibly inspirational, and it was working. I was writing the symphony. But I started feeling guilty. So I looked up this guy's number, and I called him, and I said, I reminded him who I was, and that I'd been, we'd bought our dog from them, but I told him I started writing the symphony. And by the way, I'd been downloading all of your work and printing it and posting it up in my studio. I hope that's okay.
I get a phone call, and I'm glad I got it, because I could get this off my mind. I could thank him for, the time that I'd listened to his music, because I felt truly guilty about it.
And he got really quiet, and he said, Charlie, he said, that's incredible because I've been listening to your music as inspiration for my paintings. And we each had no idea that the other was using our art as inspiration for what we were doing. He was listening to my music while he was painting, and I was looking at his paintings for inspiration for my music.
I'm flabbergasted. That was probably one of the greatest moments, to know that my paintings had actually moved somebody in this special way. And I tell you what, it was a real high point of my career since I picked up a paintbrush, that my paintings would actually move somebody emotionally in this way. I
told him, I said, I've been really using the Sangre de Cristo a lot, and he got real quiet, and because this painting was just gorgeous, and he said, oh, that's wonderful, Charlie, that's wonderful. And about a week and a half later, the original shows up via UPS at my door. And so I called Jerry up, and I said, Jerry, you just sent me the painting. And he said, yeah, I know. So I said, Jerry, you realize you're never going to get this back. So I figured that when I sent it. And then as I began to work on Sunset over Long's Peak, sure enough, another original showed up, the one that I had been actually writing the movement with, showed up at the doorstep, and he gave us two beautiful paintings that are now in my studio. And I just have to believe that that was one of those sort of divine appointments. How could that even happen? How could two people, him living in Texas, me living in Colorado, not even realizing that we're sort of becoming the inspiration for what we're working on? I just think it was just a hoot. the night of the premiere with the Colorado Symphony, May 30th, and it was cool because I played with the orchestra. I played piano with the orchestra, which is a very daunting thing. It just, that sense of, this is what I'm supposed to do, and hearing the strings and the first violin sitting next to me, and just hearing the beauty of their instrument, and the piano sort of playing against that, and that synergy that resulted in that was just one of the most beautiful experiences. I think the only thing that was weirdly distracting was sort of halfway through the concert, people began to cry in the audience, and at first I thought, well, maybe a lot of people have colds and they're sniffling, and then as we got into some of these softer movements, they were actually crying, and as a musician, that's one of the most rewarding things in the world. But at the same time, when you're nervous and you're up there playing with an orchestra, it was almost weirdly distracting, because I'm like, oh my word, people are crying. I hope I'm doing the right thing here, because I didn't expect them to be crying during the performance of the symphony. And so I had to sort of block that out of my head. And it was neat because after the symphony, one man came up and he just hugged me, an older man, and he just broke down and started weeping and weeping. And I'd never met him before. And I held him, and then he wept even more. And I don't know why he was crying. I think he was sitting in the front row that night. But I thought, if that one life was touched, then writing this entire symphony, which took me about a year, then that was worth it. I mean, that's what it's all about, and so it was pretty cool.